Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning to you all. Hope you're all doing well. All righty. Good morning, Vinvi. Good. Let me tell you. Well, you know, I can never be too sure. Anything can happen. Let me tell you, though, what is happening around the world. Let's start in the United States, where a federal appeals court has upheld the $5 million verdict awarded to former magazine columnist E. Jean Carroll against, of course, President-elect Donald Trump. Now, this is an appeal process that was brought about by Donald Trump's lawyers because they said the first trial, which took place in 2023, they said that it was unfair and the verdict was unfair because the jury was given the ability to have evidence presented to it that showed different examples of the president-elect's alleged past sexual misconduct, and they said that made that first trial and verdict unfair. But unfortunately for them and for President-elect Donald Trump, the court didn't agree. Essentially, what they wanted was to protect the jury from being able to hear that, but they obviously were able to hear that and delivered that first conviction. So what they are saying is that specific evidence links back to those videos, if you remember, especially around the 2016 election, where you had Donald Trump bragging about his sexual prowess, about how women could be grabbed by their genitalia, essentially. And so even though they didn't want those types of evidence presented to the jury, it was. But what you have this panel of judges in this appeal court say is essentially they agree with the decision to let the jury be privy to that type of information because it showed a clear campaign established when it comes to Donald Trump, his pattern of non-consensual and physical advances towards women he barely knew. Now, this original verdict, as I said, stems back from May 2023, and the incident links back to a situation that happened back in 1996 between Miss Carroll and President-elect Donald Trump at a department store, luxury department store in Manhattan. She says that she willingly entered a dressing room at that department store with Donald Trump, and she says within that dressing room she accused him of raping her. And then in a Truth social media post, he denied those claims that she had made against him and essentially referred to it as a hoax, which she, among other issues, referred to this defamation that we're seeing. We have to be very clear here when it comes to those accusations of rape that the jury in the first case did not convict Donald Trump of rape. However, they did find that he had sexually abused her, and because of that they awarded her $2 million for the sexual abuse, and in terms of the defamation, nearly $3 million, which brings in a total $5 million that was awarded to E. Jean Carroll because of this situation with Donald Trump. Now, clearly the Trump camp is not going to be happy about this situation, and we'll be expecting to hear what Donald Trump himself has to say. But as it stands now, that $5 million judgment has been upheld. So moving on to Trinidad and Tobago, which is a twin island state in the Caribbean. Essentially, the president of Trinidad and Tobago, Christina Kangaloo, has declared a state of emergency, and she's done so on the advice of her Prime Minister, Keith Rowley, who's been under pressure really to take control of the worsening crime, gang violence that's been taking place in the Caribbean nation. We've spoken about gang violence, especially when it comes to Haiti, but that's something that we're seeing a lot more in Trinidad, and a lot of that is due to high homicide. Now, unfortunately, Trinidad and Tobago has one of the highest homicide rates in Latin America and the Caribbean, with a record murder tally of more than 620 people killed this year alone. If we put those numbers into context, Trinidad and Tobago only has 1.5 million people, so 620 people murdered alone in one single year is significant. Now, that's why we're seeing this state of emergency has been declared, and the state of emergency, under the state of emergency, essentially police will have the power to arrest people on suspicion of involvement in crimes. They'll also have the power to enter public and private premises in the line of their work. All of these heightened powers to sort of protect the people of Trinidad and bring some form of security to the country ahead of its next presidential elections, which have to take place before August 2025. So we're seeing that happening in the Caribbean nation of Trinidad and Tobago. And then finally, some news coming to us from Argentina, resulting and essentially revolving around this situation we're seeing with the death of Liam Payne. Now, 5 people have now been charged for his death. If you remember Liam Payne, the British pop star, member of One Direction, 31 years old. Now, 3 people have been charged with negligent homicide, which is legalese, if you can call it that, for manslaughter, essentially. And they've been and other people have also been charged with supplying Liam Payne with drugs. Now, this is according to the Argentinian Public Prosecutor's Office. We do know that back in October he died because he fell from his 3rd floor hotel room in the Argentinian capital. Now, one of his close associates or representatives has been charged with negligent homicide alongside the hotel manager and a receptionist, and then 2 employees of the hotel, including a waiter. They have been charged with supplying Liam Payne with the drugs that were allegedly in his system at his time of death. Now, negligent homicide in Argentina carries a sentence of 5 years, up to 5 years, 1 to 5 years. But when we're looking at the supply of drugs, that carries a sentence of up to 15 years. So very, very serious charges there. We have to make clear that at this point, all 5 people have been summoned to court, but it will be unclear at this point what they plan to plead at this moment. So those are our stories. Love to hear your thoughts before we go to the newspapers.
All right, so very quickly to Trinidad and Tobago, which is a very concerning development, especially when you liken it to how we've seen the situation in Haiti deteriorate over the past few months, over the past year or so. Now, just to put things in context, 75% of the arms and weapons used in crimes in Trinidad and Tobago are trafficked from the United States. So there's an interesting dynamic with regards to how are those arms getting in, especially at such a high level, to the point that, gang violence now terrorizes the entire island nation. Not a big island nation, but, it surely can't be something that is happening without the knowledge of the state. So there's a lot of analysis around the strategic importance of Trinidad and Tobago, especially to the United States and to the global north, and who benefits from there being instability in this island nation. So I think those are some of the questions we have to ask ourselves, especially when we also look at nations like Guyana and Haiti. Then lastly, with Donald Trump, listen, a conviction is a conviction. What I do like about the United States is that generally, yes, we have seen 1 or 2 instances in recent times where we've had a lot of questions to ask about the judiciary. But at the end of the day, you do the crime. What do they say? You do the crime, then you do the time. Yeah. So he's not doing the time, of course, but he's convicted, and that it's important that that is upheld. It doesn't really impact his life in any way besides besides being a very terrible blemish on his reputation and his record, which is important. It should be on his record, and we hope that that kind of example can be followed suit globally.
Absolutely. I wonder if Donald Trump is going to grant himself, he's going to pardon himself when he becomes president. But, interesting development there. And with regards to soon to be sworn in President Donald Trump, this raises a lot of questions which we've asked on this show, which is a convict in the White House and what it looks like. We often talk about African politics, the status of leaders or the capacity or capabilities of leaders on the African continent. But we see for the first time a convict in the White House. And that is so that's surprising. But let me move on to Liam Payne. I found his case quite curious. And this shows or demonstrates just how the legal process in different countries differ. And it's important so that one doesn't begin to say that, oh, this is unfair. I remember the Dubai case you had mentioned about the minors who had consensual intercourse, and then the boy was put in jail. So according to the report, just like you mentioned, when he passed, found in his bloodstream was cocaine, alcohol, and antidepressants. What is even more curious is that in the Argentinian legal system, the prosecutors gather enough evidence, present to the judge, and then the judge determines whether or not he wants to, go ahead with the trial. In this case, the judge has ruled that he would go ahead with the trial. What is even more important is the fact that the suspects who have now been identified by their initials, even though some newspapers have been able to identify them by their real names, have said that the reason why they are being charged for manslaughter is just because they failed to take responsibility for a full-grown adult. And I find that quite curious. So the first one was one of the waiters, of course, the others for supplying drugs, and that carries a higher sentence. But it's the others, like the hotel manager, who they say saw that Liam Payne was in a state where he couldn't look after himself and didn't ensure that he wasn't put in a room that had a balcony. That is curious for me because he's a full-grown adult. The other is his friend, who they said that saw that he was in a bad state and left him alone in that state without giving him some form of care or ensuring that he was okay. So these acts of negligence on the part of friend and staff members of the hotel is leading to them facing charges of manslaughter in Argentina. And so it's, very curious case. It will be great to see, like you mentioned, it's going to go to trial. They haven't pleaded yet, to see what their lawyers are going to put forward in terms of their plea. But it is interesting to see just how important it is they take responsibility and ensuring that you're not just looking at for yourself, but even for the next person. And if any form of negligence is noted, you could be charged to court. But this would be an interesting case to follow.
Okay, the basic principle in the Liam Payne case is about duty of care. When people are in your custody or in your environment, either in your car or your vehicle, you have a responsibility to care for them, especially when you see that they are vulnerable. Judge Bruniat, who is handling that case, says that, the court is convinced that those persons, including a friend of Liam Payne, they were not planning to do any harm to him, but they also have a responsibility to make sure that he does not come to harm, having been associated with him in one way or the other, either as manager of the hotel or as drug traffickers, or as, even the receptionist that was involved, or the waiter that was involved in the case. It's about duty of care. But we'll see what their lawyers come up with. As for the case in Trinidad and Tobago, gang violence is a major threat to peace in many jurisdictions, whether it's in Guatemala, Honduras, Japan, Mexico, Haiti, in Africa, in Chad, in Mali. There have been cases of gang violence. And gang violence is linked to the proliferation of small arms and weapons. Now, Trinidad and Tobago does not manufacture arms or small weapons. These illegal weapons are, imported, illegally imported, principally from the United States, which is the largest manufacturer of, high-tech, weapons in the world. And the United States has been involved in trying to control gun violence or check illegal weapons in at least about, more than 5 of the Caribbean countries. But that has not happened. As you pointed out, 623 cases of homicide alone in Trinidad and Tobago so far in 2024. And out of those, 263 are linked to gun violence. What triggered this was, a guy called Lee going to a police station at Port-au-Spain, the capital, and then, to take bail. As he was moving out with those who went with him, they were attacked by gang members in a van, and that triggered gun violence. Leading Stuart Young, the acting Attorney General, to say that it's a necessity for government to act very quickly so that this does not spread. So it's a preventive precautionary measure. And what does the emergency mean? It means that, look, police officers can, go into premises to check. It doesn't mean that they will restrict people's movement, but they will have just greater powers to check, possession of illegal weapons. As for Donald Trump, the bigger contest is that he's winning the presidency on November 5, has given him some protection. He has about 4 criminal cases on his head in the state of Georgia, for example. In another case relating to his hoarding of classified information, the assault on the Capitol in January 2021. But as president, the United States, allows that events relating to his function as president grants him immunity, but not to civil actions against him, as was established in the case against President Bill Clinton before now. So this is a civil action matter, so that he's not been declared guilty, but they say he is liable The jury had found him liable in 2023. His lawyers went on appeal. Now the Federal Appeals Court now says, well, he's liable of defamation and sexual abuse. As you pointed out, he has to pay E. John Carroll, $5 million. So that is the situation with him, but he's now president, and that is not going to stop anything because of the legal context in the United States. But in any case, despite all of this, that was within the knowledge of Americans. They voted for him overwhelmingly. This is the irony about democracy and the choices that people make.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for all of your analysis. Great points there, especially you, when you talked about how people, it is questionable that people should be legally responsible for another adult that they are not in the legal custody of or have permission over. Very great points from you all. Thank you. Let's move on to our newspapers. And as ever, we begin with the front page of This Day on the final day of December 2024. Let us take a look at the front page of This Day. And it leads with the news of the reopening and commencement of production at the Warri Refining Petrochemicals Company plant, which was revamped to the tune of nearly $900 million and producing at 60% capacity. Now, if we move on to the Punch, and we do stay with the Warri Refinery, and the Punch reports that oil marketers, as well as the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, are saying that the prices of refined petroleum products are to drop further following the commencement of operations at the Warri Refinery with its 125,000 barrel per day capacity. Also on the front page of the Punch this morning is news that the federal government has proposed 53 billion naira to renovate 103 foreign missions. But despite the rising allocation to the missions that's supposed to be coming, significant financial challenges remain, especially with the sources estimating that almost $1 billion is required to clear the arrears and fully fund the nation's 109 missions worldwide. Those are Nigeria's missions around the world. If we move on now to this week's edition of The Advocate, Onikwe Paul Braithwaite writes her piece entitled The Disadvantages of Judicial Silence and the Government's Double Standard, which looks at the case and conviction as well as the death sentence against Segun Olookere and Sunday Morakinyo. We talked about this actually on Arise News on What's Trending, I believe it was last week or some time before then, and how he was arrested and sentenced to death for the petty theft of a chicken. But according to this article, which is actually very interesting, both gentlemen were actually arrested and convicted for armed robbery and not just the petty theft of a chicken. So that is the story, of course, that's circulated on social media. But what we're seeing in the article that I'm quoting is that essentially that wasn't the case, and that this is an example of what happens when the judiciary cannot speak on specific cases because the judiciary remains silent and preserves its dignity in this way. Situations where perhaps misinformation or part of a story circulates on social media but isn't actually what we are seeing. So it's a very insightful read on this week's edition. Moving on to the New Telegraph, and it leads with how the federal government plans to tackle insecurity, and that's through the use of radio frequency and GNSS jammers, which are carried out by producing essentially radio frequency signals that are strong enough to overpower transmissions from GNSS satellites. This is in response, of course, to terrorists resorting to drone attacks in different parts of Nigeria, especially within the north of the country. All of this is happening as gunmen abduct 2 people in Yola, which, as we know, is the capital of Adamawa State. Let's move on to The Guardian this morning. And The Guardian has named its Person of the Year for 2024, and it's the Nigerian diaspora. From broken dreams to a new global value chain. That is their headline for the article, which highlights the yearly remittances coming into Nigeria from the diaspora, and also the guidance on what needs to be done for a better society. So essentially, people who are in the diaspora, they are giving back to Nigerians in such a way that is positively aiding the country financially, but also allowing people to have a better understanding of the quality of life that they should be demanding from their representatives. Let's move on to Kenya now. And Kenya's Daily Nation has fury over the spate of abductions. As its headline today, Kenyans took to the streets on Monday to protest against the wave of abductions and enforced disappearances targeting critics of President William Ruto. Pictured on the front page is Kenyan Senator Omatata. He is reacting as riot police detain him and other protesters during those demonstrations. And finally, we come here to the United Kingdom, where on the front page of the Daily Mail is the New Year's honours list. It's actually causing a little bit of ruckus. Now, Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is due to be knighted and so will be referred to as Sir Sadiq Khan. But leading members of the Conservative Party say that he's being rewarded for failure. Citing London's knife crime issues and, of course, hikes in council tax and congestion charge in the city of London. Now, some others who will also be knighted and recognised for their service to the country will be Gareth Southgate, the England manager who led England to back-to-back finals of the Euros in 2020 and this year 2024, as well as Keely Hodgkinson, who won Olympic gold in the 800 metres, I believe it was, in the Paris Olympics. And then, of course, there is Jacqueline Wilson. I don't know if you ladies or gentlemen have heard of Jacqueline Wilson, but she's a beloved childhood author, my favourite childhood author, and she has been made a Dame Grand Cross, GBE, for services to literature. So those are your stories from around the world. This is, of course, the last day of December of 2024. Sending you all the best wishes for the new year ahead. Okay, Adefemi, you are glad that Wilson is on that list. Kazuo Ishiguro is also there, very Nobel laureate, in literature. And Gareth Southgate is there. As for the Conservatives complaining about Sadiq Khan, yes, what do you expect them to say? Sadiq Khan is a former Labour MP anyway, but thank you very much.